If there is one thing that I hate, it's when people flat out refuse to inform themselves about something at all, and use their vague feelings and assumptions as a replacement for actual knowledge. And I'm looking your way, we'll have a talk soon. But for now, let's talk about the New Left, which is a prime example of such behavior, especially when it comes to the current refugee crisis. In their minds, it's mostly well-educated and adjusted families, mostly women and children, from Syria, fleeing war and terror. And if you disagree, well, then you're both an asshole and an Islamophobe. Pretty ironic that you don't have to look for any alternative sources of news or research on this, but you can just use the data produced by the very same government that's both responsible for the migrant crisis and does its best to paint it as something positive. In a recent paper by the German Refugee and Migrant Agency, we have a few really interesting numbers. Turns out that most refugees are in fact young, average educated men. And if you don't know why young, foreign, uneducated male Muslims are a tremendous issue for the host country, I did a video on this. Pause this one, click here and see you in a few minutes. If not, just keep on listening in. So let's take a look at this notion of mostly well-educated women and children from Syria fleeing war and terror. While Syria was the main source of refugees both in 2015 and 2016, with 162,000 in 2016 alone, it accounts only for about 40% of all major refugee sources. So yeah, Syrians actually are not a majority. Most of those refugees are men, 73.8% to be precise, and 68% of those men are younger than 33 years. The percentage of male refugees rises to more than 75% if you exclude Serbia and Macedonia, which are non-Muslim countries. Which, by the way, is really interesting. Roughly only 50% of all refugees from the non-Muslim countries of Serbia and Macedonia are male, while it's a whopping 75% from Muslim countries. The New Left often tries to downplay this by saying that almost all of those men are fathers and husbands, brave vanguards trying to establish themselves in Europe and have their families come afterwards. This is true for Macedonia, to a certain degree Albania, but overall only 48.7% of all men are married. So yeah, not women and children, not Syrian, and definitely not brave husbands and fathers. When it comes to education, the picture becomes even more convoluted. 35.2% of all Iranian refugees, for instance, have visited university, which is pretty impressive, while roughly 50% of both Serbian and Macedonian refugees attended only elementary school. Again, impressive, but just in a different way. Overall though, 17.8% of all refugees attended university, 20.4% attended only secondary school, 31% high school, 22% elementary school, and 7% have no formal education whatsoever. This is especially true for Afghanistan, with its 27.2% that had no formal education at all. Those numbers are, on average, somewhat comparable to European countries, but keep in mind that it's pretty complicated to verify most of those claims, and forgery of documents is, well, rampant amongst refugees today. So they are not all that well educated, they are not women and children, and they are not Syrian. They certainly are at least fleeing war and terror, right? Well, sorry not sorry to disappoint you again, but Serbia, Albania, Kosovo and Macedonia are labeled as safe countries in terms of asylum processes. This means that more than a third of all refugees are officially not fleeing war and terror. So there you have it. Most refugees actually are normal, educated young Muslim men from a wide variety of Balkan and Middle Eastern countries, fleeing for a bunch of different reasons, including financial ones. And if they behave in any way similar to their cousins in Germany right now, we're basically fucked. I'm Dr. Layman, glad you tuned in, and as always, Babylon prevails.